There's a saying that God won't give you more than you can handle, but there are times in life when our circumstances make that seem like a total lie. You're overwhelmed, you can't cope, and you don't know if you can go on. My guest today went through just such a season and is here to talk about the powerful lessons she learned through it. Joy Byers, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
This is tough. This is not an easy thing to talk about. It starts out really, really terrible. Tell me what happened to your daughter.
This goes back about 4 years now. It was September 2015 on a Monday, and it was a beautiful day. I remember that. As I was just getting ready to leave work, I get a phone call that says, you need to come to the hospital now. We discovered as we arrive at the hospital that my daughter had had a massive brain bleed. And at the time, she was 6.5 months pregnant. So this had a lot of implications. The doctors didn't think it was promising, and what they said made us realize the gravity of it, that they would keep my daughter alive as long as possible to ensure that my granddaughter had the best opportunity of survival.
Wow. So your daughter's in perfect health, pregnant, everything seems fine. You go from that to this totally unprepared for situation overnight.
Yeah, it turned everything upside down because it's not what you're expecting. It's a beautiful day. What do you mean? It's like, what? So it was just one of those things that it blew us away as a family. My husband, because this was his little girl, this man whose heart was breaking, and just a family who were sitting in a hospital going, I don't understand. I don't understand. I just don't understand. But yeah.
So what happened to your daughter and to her baby?
So on the morning of September 15th, my granddaughter was born by C-section, 2 pounds, 9 ounces, with very big feet, making sure that we knew she was part of our family. And on that same day, the doctors declared my daughter brain dead.
Wow.
But yes, the beautiful part in all of this is when I have a beautiful granddaughter who is going to be 4 this year. And my daughter gave her organs. She was an organ donor. So lives got to be saved as a result of her life. So it wasn't totally desperate, that there were things that we could say, okay, although we hated this, although it was very painful, although sometimes you're sitting there going, but she's so young, I don't understand this. How could this be happening to us? God showed us that even in this, good things could come from it.
And of course, it's totally the reverse of the natural order of things, right? You should never have to lose a child. It should be the child should be saying goodbye to the parent, which I'm not in favor of either, by the way. But yeah, so how is your mental state at this time? Because you're trying to deal with this brand new baby in your family, but you've said goodbye to your own baby girl.
Yeah, I think because she has 3 other children as well, the night that she was declared brain dead, I remember just having to sit the grandkids down with the rest of our extended family and just tell them that their mom wasn't coming home. And my oldest grandson, I will never forget the wail in his voice as he said, my life is ruined. My mom is gone. For me, I think I was okay until that point. Not that you're okay, but I could manage until that point, and I remember just walking upstairs and just bawling my eyes out, going, this can't be. He's so young. They need her. But as I thought about it, I am a woman. I am a Black woman, and we are raised with a very strong, solid upbringing, so it's okay. I have to be strong for the family. I have to get through this. We need to figure out things. There are plans that need to be made. There's a 2 pound, 9 ounce baby that needs to be cared for, visited, and they still weren't sure whether or not she would survive because she was just a little thing. But all of that kicks in. So the things that you have to do.
Yeah.
I think, which I was grateful for at the time. And my team at work were awesome because everybody is saying go home. But I am not the go home person. I need to do something before I lose my mind.
Yeah, keep your mind off everything. Yeah. But the thing is, the terrible things that were happening to you weren't over. Tell me what happened next.
I was wishing they were over because that was enough in itself. But a week later, on the Thursday, my mom called me about 6:30 in the morning. And everybody knows if your mom is calling at 6:30, it's generally not a good thing. And she called to let me know that my uncle who had raised me, because my dad died when I was really young, My uncle, who had been there for me my whole life, had passed away overnight. And that was another blow. I'm like, okay, but he's older. And you're thinking, okay, I can deal with this. And I'm talking to my mom, making sure that she's okay, and get off the phone with her, get dressed for work because he's in Barbados. We're here in Toronto, or I'm here in Toronto, she's in Montreal, and it's like, okay, what do we do with this? But things needed to get done, so off I go to work, to a training that I needed to attend that day. And then 12:30 in the afternoon, she calls me, and I come out of training thinking she's talking about flights and do we need to send money and all of that type of thing. But no, she had called to tell me that my aunt, whose house I spent every summer at, had passed away within the last half hour. And I remember one of my team walking outside, one of the young guys, his name was Dave, and he looked at me and I just bawled. He didn't ask what was wrong. He's a good Christian brother. He just gave a shoulder, let me cry. I walked around the building and I think that's when I began to truly question. It's like, okay, God, what is happening? What have I not done? What am I doing wrong? Why is this happening? Like, I don't understand this at all.
So you were thinking it was you, not God. You weren't mad at God yet. You were thinking maybe I did something wrong.
I've done something wrong. And you, as a pastor, I wonder, so often you hear people going, but I must have done something, and we're always reassuring and engaging because I know the truth of Scripture. I know Jesus. I know who my God is. And I know that it's nothing that I've done, but you hit that moment when you feel like it has to be something that I've done. This can't be happening this way. God wouldn't allow this to happen to me this way. But it did, and it had. And then the following week was when we buried my daughter. So this was like bang, bang, bang. So you hit a mode where I think you're just doing what you have to do. It's almost robotic. You're seeing people are offering their condolences, and you're like, and you carry on and you do what you need to do, but then you don't process, I think, properly because it was just so much back to back.
Of course. And it wasn't done.
No.
This is like,
truly, this is where you're like, okay.
Can this woman take any more?
Can we just like sit for a minute? And then at this point, I'm part of a team that is bringing a speaker to Toronto that year. And as part of that team, there are things that need to be done there. I'm a pastor at a church, so things that need to be done there, people to be cared for, my family to be cared for. And as we're moving into the next season, October passes relatively peacefully, but November, I get a call from my cousin. I had spoken to my mom on the Sunday night, and things were good. She was going to go to her cousin's place. They were going to go shopping, and when my mom gets to shopping, you don't hear from her for days because they're gone. So I wasn't expecting to hear from her. But my cousin called and said, hey, have you heard from your mom? And something goes off in the back of your head. It's like, she's at Auntie's. Why? He says, well, actually, she's not there. And nobody's heard from her. And your heart sinks. It's like, okay, but you go into that mode. All right, I'm going to call one of the neighbors home in Montreal because we grew up in a community where everybody knew each other. So I called the neighbor who lived across the street and asked her, can you see in my house? Can you see any lights? Can you see my mom moving? Can you just go over and look through the windows? So she did. She walked across the street. She came back. And she said, no. She goes, I can see the lights on in the kitchen, but I can't see any movement, and I can't see in the living room because the blinds were down.
Wow.
I said, okay. I called one of my aunties, not truly an aunt, but a friend of the family that I had grown up with. I let her know what was happening, and I told her, I'm going to call the police, and this was the funny part, I think, in it, I started to laugh. I'm going to tell them how to break into our house, because there was a way that you could break in that wouldn't break anything. So instructed them what they need to do, and they did what they call a welfare check. And as I called them, I just sat on the floor in our bedroom, and I waited, and my husband sat with me, and we just waited, and that was the longest 20 minutes of my life. As we waited, they didn't call back, but when the officer called back, he said, the first thing he said is, your mom is okay. And you get this swell of relief going, okay, so what, the phone lines are down? What's happened? He goes, actually, no, she's had a stroke. I said, she's okay, but she's had a stroke. I said, can I talk to her? He goes, well, actually, no, because they're getting her into the ambulance and they're going to take her to the hospital. So he gave me the information I needed. And then the next day, we hopped in the car and drove to Montreal to see my mom. And she had had a massive stroke. She was paralyzed in her left arm and her left leg. Her speech was relatively slurred.
Wow.
And the doctors, she had been on the floor for 2 days. That was from the Sunday night to the Tuesday
Amazing
night.
that you found her when you did.
Yeah, they said had it been much longer, they don't know because she had suffered subsequent strokes after that one. And the thing is, and I advocate for everybody having a safety device because the phone was literally just tipped out of the reach of her hand that she couldn't get to it to press the numbers.
So tell me how you're processing this, because you are, as you said, you're a pastor.
Mm-hmm.
You got the answers. Let's be honest.
Yes, we have the answers.
But
we know
this
scripture.
is unprecedented. Like all to have that, you know, the loss of your daughter, your grandbaby born premature in her death, your aunt and your uncle, your mother have a stroke. How are these conversations with God going now?
Not so good. This is the point where it switched from something that I've done to, hey, God, are you even real? Do you even see me? Do you even care? And the conversations got dark and bitter and angry. And I couldn't understand, if I'm doing God's work, how could he possibly let this happen to me? And it began a season of just me not trusting God, not truly knowing, but not knowing. I knew he was real. I knew that he saw people. I know scripture. I know and love my Lord. But in that season, I just couldn't wrap my head around all of this happening and a good and loving God. How could a good and loving God let this happen to my family? How could he let this happen to me? But I had some sisters, a good community of women who love me, who know me intimately, who call me on the hard stuff, who sat me down and said, enough. And we just started to go back through scripture on the promises of God. And, you know, you never want to go to the story of Job, but we went to the story of Job.
Skip that book in the Bible,
we,
yes.
we like to go, but it's like, yeah, that's not going to happen. But we went to the story of Job. And as we got together and as we spent time together and worked through this story, I began to see that God saw all of this and God was present in it. And as Job railed against him, God was big enough to take his anger, his hurt, his pain, but he still, somewhere inside, trusted that God was God. And if it wasn't for that community of sisters that I had, and also a great team at work, I don't know, honestly, how long it would have taken me to get back there. They forced me to stop and just work through the grieving process, because I am that person who, I don't like to cry. I don't like to admit weakness. And to me, at that time, it was weak to cry for a pastor. We just don't do that.
Not to mention the guilt of being a pastor and being mad at God and not speaking to him, basically, right?
And that was a whole other story. It's like, okay, God, like, really? So this doesn't make sense, God, because I can't be a pastor and not trust you and not believe that you are God. I can't possibly be called to this. This can't possibly be what you have for me. So it just brought up a whole lot of doubt and concern, just a whole lot of questioning about faith, a whole lot of questioning about God, questioning everything, really.
Which is a natural reaction for all of us when we go
Yes.
through really, really hard times. We're just about out of time, Joy. Tell me what you learned through this and what people watching who are going through similar dark, dark periods in their lives can learn.
And that's the beauty of it, Cheryl. Regardless of how we feel, it's not about our feelings. God is God. He knows and he sees. And when I thought he didn't see me, he saw me and he was present with me. And he is actually the one who lifted my head and helped me to keep putting one foot in front of the other. So if you're in a dark pit, if you're lost and you think that God doesn't see you, he absolutely does. It just might not feel like it, but truly he does.
So good. And 4 years later, you're doing okay?
We're doing okay. Grandkids are all aging well, doing what grandkids do. And my granddaughter, the youngest, will be 4 this year. And she is bossy and loves Jesus. So it doesn't get much better than that.
Thank you so much for coming to share your story today, Joy.
Oh, thanks for having me.
We could have talked forever.
Oh, all day.
If this is you, if you are in that dark pit that Joy talked about, and you know, hey, pastors are people too, right? We all go through stuff. Life is hard at different times. But the one thing we need is that supportive community that she talked about. And we'd love to be that for you. If you are going through a dark time and you just need to have somebody with skin on telling you that God is there, praying with you even if you're not talking to him, maybe we can talk to him for you. Give us a call. That number is 1-866-273-4444. Or you can email us at prayer@crossroads.ca. We'll be right back.